This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Trump tariffs. Nova Scotia reacts to the U.S. president's latest move in the trade war.
Halifax riding profile. A look at the candidates and how souring U.S.-Canada relations is an issue on the doorstep.
And how an exoskeleton is helping this man get back on his feet.
A messy mix over to rain for the overnight into early Friday with mild temperatures on tap throughout the day. Your full forecast is coming up.
Nova Scotia's main export industries appear to have avoided further penalties from Donald Trump's new U.S. tariffs.
Premier Tim Houston says the province's actions in response will remain in place, but there will not be any new measures for now.
The CBC's Gareth Hampshire was in Westville to cover his news conference.
Premier Tim Houston says things could have been worse with the new U.S. tariffs that have been announced, but are still not great. He acknowledges people are exhausted by the stress and uncertainty of the U.S. actions against Canada, but says Nova Scotia's main export businesses are not facing any new measures.
It's a fluid situation, for sure. We're continuing to assess the actual impact of the announcements that were made yesterday. So the initial understanding is that some of our major industries have been spared new tariffs. The ones that had been put in place before are still there, and certainly the Chinese tariffs also having an impact on Nova Scotia. But in terms of the announcement yesterday, there doesn't appear to have been any new bad news, let's say.
This means the major businesses in fishing, tires and lumber are not currently subject to further U.S. tariffs. However, Houston says the instability of the economy overall will affect Nova Scotia because of how far-reaching this trade war is. That's why the province is continuing with its own retaliatory measures against the U.S. So American alcohol will stay off the NSLC shelves and U.S. commercial vehicles will still have to pay tolls on the Cobequid Pass. Nova Scotia is also trying to remove interprovincial trade barriers and expects other provinces to follow. And Houston is noting there will be impacts due to other parts of the country being hit hard by the new tariffs, in particular the 25% tariffs on vehicles.
We still have tariffs on some industries, and what hurts one part of the country hurts the entire country.
Houston spoke with other premiers and Mark Carney on Thursday. He is supporting the Team Canada approach and how Carney is trying to deal with the situation. He says everyone is moving in the same direction in a challenging time. Gareth Hampshire, CBC News, Westville.
Prime Minister Mark Carney addressed Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. He outlined his plan for Canada's short and long-term response to a U.S. policy shift he calls a tragedy and historic.
The 80-year period when the United States embraced the mantle of global economic leadership, when it forged alliances rooted in trust and mutual respect, and championed the free and open exchange of goods and services, is over.
Carney announced duties to match the U.S. auto tariffs. He also pledged the tariff proceeds will be used to help Canadian workers hit by Trump's trade war.
Nova Scotia Health says it has hired one doctor eager to leave the United States because of Donald Trump, and it's in talks with 24 more. The health authority launched a campaign in the U.S. in November targeting physicians feeling uneasy about the election. It says the response was immediate.
That was a really quick turnaround. We have a couple of others that have asked for locuming that are already doing their licensing pieces. So we expect to see them. So I think boots on the ground, we expect to see some of those individuals sooner than later in the coming months.
The health authority is targeting American physicians who live along the eastern seaboard. Their pitch is that the lifestyle and weather is similar, making for a smooth transition to Nova Scotia.
It may stand out as being the longest campaign in this election, but the Halifax riding left vacant by Andy Fillmore is following a trend that's happening across the country. Local issues such as around housing and affordability and healthcare are being overshadowed by the trade war with Canada and U.S. sovereignty. trade war with the U.S. and Canadian sovereignty. Preston Mulligan now with a look at the riding of Halifax in this election campaign.
Here on the riding of Halifax, this election campaign is guided by outside forces more than anything local. Take the NDP's Lisa Roberts. Last fall, she was feeling that front-runner energy. The polling looked good, better than good.
In the fall, when they showed me 80% likely to win Halifax, that wasn't real. You know, in the same way that now when they're projecting that the NDP is, going to lose opposition status, that's also not real.
Those polls came at a time when Trudeau was still prime minister, his popularity tanking. He's gone now, and so is the carbon tax. And Mark Carney's entrance into public life amid threats to Canadian sovereignty from Trump have shifted voting intentions here dramatically. Still, Roberts hopes voters see value in an NDP member of parliament, even if they're not in government, a model set by Alexa McDonough and Megan Leslie. Shannon Miedema, the Liberal contender, says many of those NDP voters are looking at her now.
I would say that I have heard confirmation that that is happening at some doors, and a lot of undecided at other doors that are, and they'll say, I'm stuck between choosing NDP or Liberal.
Political watchers say what's happening in Halifax is happening all over the country. Outside forces have extraordinary influence right now, and that's not working in the NDP's favor.
There are people who are very much concerned about national elements. And frankly, the NDP is not in the game. When they're talking about things that involve the Canadian flag, the NDP is seen as a bit player in all of that. And it's really a dynamic between Liberals and Conservatives.
Conservative candidate Mark Boudreau's staff declined CBC's invitation for an interview, saying their candidate, quote, is focused instead on engaging with voters' issues on the doorstep. Electoral issues that are perhaps more urgent now than ever. Preston Mulligan, CBC News, Halifax.
And joining us now, Ryan Snoddon from the CBC Weather Centre.
Yes, nice and cozy inside, but it was a messy Thursday.
Yeah, and it's going to continue to be messy through the evening into the overnight before those temperatures eventually do bump up across the province slowly but surely. Let's walk you through this timeline. And you can see still hanging out near the freezing mark for eastern areas with the messy mix of the snow, the ice pellets, the freezing rain, bumping up. Those temperatures are western and into central areas with fog patches rolling in as that milder air rolls through. That's going to be the case in the east through the overnight and starting quite mild on Friday. Clouds likely a bit stubborn throughout the day for eastern and even into central areas, but I think a solid mix of sun and cloud in the west. We'll see some breaks of sun even for central and eastern areas, but expecting the clouds to be a bit more dominant here. The wind's becoming northwesterly on Friday, and so temperatures falling a little bit into the afternoon in the east, but as you can see, we'll be into the double digits, central and western areas with a little bit of sunshine as well, so we'll hang our hat on that. Talking about another weekend system on the way. Okay. More on that coming up.
Stay tuned. Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
The Nova Scotia government is spending nearly $8 million to create a new psychology program and clinic at Halifax University. The goal is to improve access to mental health and addictions care for children and youth while keeping newly trained psychologists in the province. Josh Hoffman reports.
The Nova Scotia government is funding a new program at Mount St. Vincent University to improve access to child and youth mental health care in the province. The Department of Advanced Education and Mental Health and Addictions are putting forth a combined $7.9 million to get a doctoral psychology program up and running and to build a new clinic on campus. The course will provide specialized training for future psychologists, focusing on applied knowledge and practical training to meet demand in the province.
We've had conversations, with a number of post-secondary institutions over the last couple of years. Historically, not just in Nova Scotia, but I would say across the country. Certainly a scarce resource at times.
Comer says, speaking to other stakeholders in the province, they've learned many families in Nova Scotia struggle to get the care they need.
Well, it's just part of our mission is to break down barriers to access, and that includes in community resources as well. So the clinic will be free of charge to those who wouldn't otherwise have access. So for example, those who don't currently have benefits that would cover assessment and treatment. And so we're working with the province in terms of how that will happen logistically.
Dickinson says the university already has psychology programs, so this is somewhat of a natural progression for the school. She believes having the first of its kind program in Nova Scotia will help keep healthcare professionals in the province.
There's anecdotal evidence that demonstrates that wherever you do your studies and internship, that's where you will stay. So by increasing the number of residencies, it very likely will keep those at least 4 graduates per year in the province and practicing here.
The 4-year Doctor of Psychology will have 8 spots open, with 4 for the residency. The program is expected to start in September 2026, with the clinic opening on campus and plans to serve 200 children and youth every year. Josh Hoffman, CBC News, Halifax.
A new Halifax Centre for people who are intoxicated is ready to go but can't find a home. The Stabilization Centre would help people under the influence of drugs or alcohol rather than have them in a police cell. Municipal staff say they considered more than 50 possible sites, but all have fallen through. Halifax's public safety advisor says many landlords simply don't want the centre in their building.
The stigma that's associated with people who use substances, experiencing homelessness, and that stigma is a barrier not only for this service, but all kinds of services that we know are necessary to support that particular population. So I think it's really that's the barrier.
The city is splitting the yearly cost with the province. Staff say they will announce who is running the centre once they find a location.
Northumberland Ferry says several pipes froze on the MV Northumberland as it made its way to the region. But the company says it didn't cause any damage to the ship. That's the ferry bought in 2023 to run between Nova Scotia and PEI. It was formerly known as the Fianafjord. Officials with Northumberland Ferries say as the boat made its way to PEI, it encountered some very extreme winter conditions, and that meant some frozen fresh water pipes. Officials say the boat is designed to Norwegian specifications, so it should have been able to handle the cold weather. They say the issue has since been fixed. Josh Nevers can't feel his legs, but he's able to walk using a special robotic suit.
He and other patients at the Stan Cassidy Centre for Rehabilitation in Fredericton are using one of the only 2 exoskeletons in all of Atlantic Canada.
It's a battery-powered walking device that helps people rehabilitate from injuries and improve their bone health.
Go straight step in 3, 2, 1. The exoskeleton is a battery-operated wearable walking device that allows individuals that have minimal movement in their legs, that require assistance to walk, to get up and take steps, and to train in a rehab setting to improve their walking or to kind of start walking if it's after a new injury. It has motors at the hip and at the knee. It allows patients to take more steps than they otherwise could over ground. So we're working on what we call neuroplasticity and actually changing the nervous system by taking more steps.
Spinal injury, T10, which is about a little over halfway down the back, but I have a little lower than that. I can feel my hips and stuff, so it's a little lower.
And his sessions last about an hour, and it's working on reconditioning. It's working on getting him used to being in a standing position, getting back to being able to walk and know what it feels like again to walk.
No, the only other one is that right.
Feels like walking again.
Yeah.
Yeah, feels pretty amazing.
It's great to see him, upright again, right? And we talk about the benefits of standing, bone health, management of spasticity, contractures, cardiovascular. There's so many different reasons for standing. But one of the big things that always brings a smile to my face is when I have somebody eye to eye again, right? So for him, he's often looking up. And I think he gets a kick out of it too, because he's seeing me eye to eye, which he hasn't, for a while. So yeah, I think there's a lot of pleasure in that as well, and sort of like that psychological benefit.
Quite a bit of water in the Sackville River in Bedford. Brian's got the full forecast when he comes back after the break.
All right, as predicted, messy day out there.
Yeah.
It
Yes.
was not pleasant at all, was it?
No, not at all. But light at the end of the tunnel for the end of the work week.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. We're ending on a high note, which is great. We'll see some sunshine in the mix for Friday. Nowhere to go but up after
one way to
today.
look at it.
Have a look at our webcam shot. This Wentworth
Oh, wow.
could go for a ski.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah,
Perhaps
perhaps a bit,
some melting, right?
yeah, perhaps a bit,
Maybe a bit
patchy
soggy,
there.
yes,
yeah.
I think.
But yeah, we are looking at those temperatures continuing to bump up, and including in central areas of the province, as we can see there, right around 0 at Wentworth right now, already up to 1 in Halifax, and the fog patches rolling in, 6 in Shelburne. That's the hot spot for now, and you can see -3 in Sydney. That's our cool spot for now. But the winds are, all shifting in from the south. That milder air will continue to creep in for the next handful of hours as we really bump those temperatures up overnight. sustained near 20 right now for most, gusting towards 40 and 50 kilometers per hour. And that'll be the case as we go from a southeast wind to a southwest wind. And you can see where the bulk of that snow is still coming down for Cape Breton and into the North Shore. Starting to see that mixing over the last little bit here through central areas, including up into the Colchester, Cumberland area. Not a lot of rain here to follow this system. We'll see definitely some scattered showers and some drizzle, but generally speaking, not a whole lot of moisture. The most of the moisture was along the warm front with this wintry mix. Now, as we look at the bigger picture temperature-wise, you can see the sharp cold front here. 31 in Houston, 12 in Oklahoma City. Some more severe weather today in the southeast of the U.S. Temperatures riding the freezing mark through most of Canada. But how about Toronto? 19 degrees. And as the melt continues, and of course, after that severe ice storm, Hydro One there calling it the worst ice storm in southern Ontario since the 98 ice storm there. So some confirmation of just how bad things have been there. Still many without power. Now, as we look at the Thursday evening time frame for us, we are watching that snow changing over to ice pellets and freezing rain for Cape Breton through this evening, as well as Antigonish and Guysborough. Note that the timeline here, it's going to be a late evening mix over, but we'll get there. Note by the time we get to Friday morning, stubborn, sluggish cloud cover for Cape Breton with a chance of a shower. Still bumping into the mid to high single digits, though, eastern mainland, and some double-digit potential even to start the day in the west. And then we're going to be looking at, a mix of sun and cloud for western areas. Some sun breaks in through central, and the eastern areas are going to be pretty capped with clouds, but I do think we'll see at least the potential for some sun. Northwest winds kicking in, dropping temperatures here a little bit into the afternoon, and with that, an isolated chance of a shower lingering here. We'll cloud up even in the west as well, but I do think, that chance for a shower, as I said, lingering into the afternoon. Temperatures will be a bit warmer, perhaps for a couple of hours here for Inverness, but generally near the mid-single digits for tomorrow. We are going to be looking at 8 to 9, 10, even 11 degrees for eastern parts of the mainland, including Antigonish and into Pictou County. Double-digit potential, greatest from Amherst down through central, including for the Halifax area, and a brighter sky here, as we said, in the west. Temperatures ranging between 10, 11, and even 12 degrees. Even after the wind shift to northwest, it'll take some time. That colder air will spill in. Chance for a flurry Friday night into early Saturday morning along that North Shore. And Saturday is going to be an interesting day, temperature-wise. High pressure certainly in control ahead of this next system, but it's kind of, we call it dirty high. There's not a lot of sunshine that's going to be mustered up here. And with this northeast wind, we're going to be seeing temperatures 0 to 1 to 2 to maybe 3 degrees from Sydney through Antigonish into Pictou, and then greater potential for some milder temps down into the south and west away from the onshore flow. The next system won't have nearly as much wintry mix on the leading edge, but it will be there Saturday night and Sunday morning, especially into the east if you're going to be traveling there. We will bump over to rain into the afternoon and ending into the high single and low double digits. Still a little unsettled through early next week, but some sunshine in the long range.
Okay.
Looking forward to that.
There is that. Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Coming up, reciprocal tariffs. The Prime Minister outlines plans to hit back against Donald Trump's latest levies. Welcome back. As we told you earlier, Liberal leader Mark Carney returned to his role as Prime Minister to address Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs.
He outlined his plan for Canada's short and long-term response to the latest levies. Ashley Burke reports.
The day after Donald Trump hit virtually every country in the world with tariffs, the Prime Minister warning Trump's ruptured the global economy, torpedoing its growth.
The President's actions will reverberate here in Canada and across the world.
Mark Carney calling Trump's tariffs unjustified, unwarranted, and misguided as he strikes back.
We must respond with both purpose and force. We are a free, sovereign, and ambitious country.
The government hitting the U.S. with tariffs on American vehicles non-compliant with their trade deal, matching what Trump slapped on Canada's auto sector overnight.
These auto companies aren't making money hand over fist. They're basically trying to get by day by day and keep their people employed. So our goal is to continue negotiating down to a 0%.
Automaker Stellantis already halting production at a plant in Ontario in response to Trump. News that hit the campaign trail.
This is a direct attack on these workers. And for the workers that I met at Stellantis, they woke up to an announcement now that their plant has been shut down for 2 weeks. Can I touch it? Yes.
The Conservatives seizing on the auto tariffs to take aim at Carney for not stopping it.
Just last Friday, Mark Carney said he had a, quote, very productive, very constructive call with President Trump, citing progress. Unfortunately, Canada has not been spared. There is no progress.
Carney pushing back, saying Canada was spared new tariffs yesterday, while 3 rounds already announced remain in place.
We have the best deal of a series of tough deals, bad deals in many respects. That is progress.
Carney said he doesn't think Trump will change course unless Americans feel so much financial pain that it's impossible to ignore. He says that could be a hard and long road for Canadians and is headed back on the campaign trail to try and pitch himself as the one to lead Canada out of this trade war. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Lana Saf is senior economist at the Atlantic Economic Council. There has been so much confusion around these tariffs. As someone who watches this kind of thing closely, how clear are things for you?
Oh my gosh, unfortunately, not the most clear. We're learning at the same time as everyone else what is happening on the U.S. side and then what's happening with the Canadian countermeasures as well. So unfortunately, I foresee a period of uncertainty to come.
Okay, as best as you can tell at this point at least, how much do you think Nova Scotia will feel the effects of these retaliatory tariffs that were announced yesterday?
So Trump didn't announce any retaliatory tariffs on Canada yesterday. So what he announced yesterday was what we had already heard was coming. And then as of today, the U.S. auto tariffs were being implemented as well. But we already foresaw that coming as well. So Trump did say that there could be more to come in terms of some strategic sectors that he wants to focus on implementing tariffs. He mentioned pharmaceuticals, lumber, semiconductor. So we're still in very much a wait and see kind of situation in terms of what more Trump is going to do and what he might do in response to the Canadian counter tariffs that have just been announced.
I mean, the U.S. is talking about a lot of different aspects in this for sure. It is putting a 25% tariff on all imports of foreign-made vehicles. Canada says it's going to respond with 25% tariff on all vehicles that are, quote, not compliant with CUSMA, the free trade agreement. Either way, are cars and trucks going to be more expensive?
That would certainly be the assumption, because not only will the tariffs apply to cars that are coming into Canada that are not CUSMA compliant. And I should say I don't know what share of cars it is, so it's hard to say how broad the price increases will be. But also, since the U.S. is implementing tariffs, across the board for many different countries, automotive supply chains can be highly global, and also we are highly integrated with the U.S. supply chain. So it's really hard to say how any tariffs that the U.S. is implementing on parts that's coming into their country will then filter through to automobile prices in Canada, coming from the U.S., coming from vehicles that are non-compliant with CUSMA.
Yeah, it seems so difficult to unravel and to dissect here, but there's the 25% levy on the foreign-made vehicles. We make car parts, tires at Michelin, for example, the big one. How will these tariffs affect those kinds of things?
They will certainly be effective. I think we're still waiting to see in terms of how the U.S. government will implement tariffs when it comes to the non-U.S. auto parts. He did mention that he is going to be specific, or the administration is going to be specifically implementing tariffs on parts that did not originate from the U.S. If they, are an input to the vehicle that's coming into the U.S. So we're still waiting to see what will happen there.
We're all waiting to see what happens, I suppose. We're in this counter-tariff era now. Do you see more of that? And will the U.S. expand things to, say, come after our dairy industry, for example? What are you seeing in the next weeks and months?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that President Trump is not a fan of what's going on with our dairy or supply management system here within Canada. So it remains to be seen whether he'll take specific action on that. And, I understand that Prime Minister Carney, in his response to the U.S. tariffs, he's trying to be very specific, trying not to broaden the impacts in terms of all goods coming from the United States, or even a wide selection of goods coming from the United States. So he's really focused on the latest kind of round of tariffs coming from the auto sector. So we will see what President Trump thinks of those measures and whether he will be responding with, reciprocal tariffs on that.
And I hear some people saying, it could have been a lot worse. We're not a country that's being affected the way perhaps some other countries are. But lots of questions, as you point out. So what effect is all this uncertainty having?
Well, we have certainly talked to businesses and read about businesses within Canada and within Atlantic Canada who are taking a pause right now. They're waiting to see what will happen, and they're holding off on big key strategic expansions or operational plans to determine the best course of action once they get a little bit more clarity from the situation.
Is it somewhat fair to say, at least, that the trade has changed forever or for the foreseeable future?
Absolutely. I think Prime Minister Carney kind of put it well yesterday when he was saying that this has fundamentally changed the trading system globally.
Lots to talk about in the future about this, for sure. Really appreciate your comments on this today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, economists predict tariffs will cost U.S. consumers and businesses billions of dollars this year.
And strengthening Canada's economy, the trade war with the U.S. is top of mind for federal party leaders on the campaign trail. Welcome back. Stock markets around the globe fell sharply Thursday morning in response to new U.S. tariffs. Donald Trump has put 10% levies on nearly all countries, with rates higher for more than 6 nations or trading blocs.
The U.S. Commerce Secretary says those tariffs are needed, but as Richard Madden reports, not all American lawmakers are convinced.
I think it's going very well. President Donald Trump dismissing the global fallout from his aggressive tariff policy by comparing it to an urgent medical surgery that needed to be done. It was an operation, like when a patient gets operated on, and it's a big thing. The administration says it's short-term pain for long-term prosperity after Trump slapped sweeping 10% blanket tariffs on nearly every country in the world. Markets have since tanked, and economists are now warning of inflationary price hikes, retaliation from allies, causing a potential recession ignited by Trump's own trade and tariff war. But the White House says the president's actions will realign global trade, and the world simply needs to trust him.
Let Donald Trump run the global economy. He knows what he's doing. He's been talking about it for 35 years. You got to trust Donald Trump in the White House. That's why they put him there.
On Capitol Hill, more Republicans are publicly breaking from Trump's tariff agenda. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley introduced a bill that would block Trump from imposing more tariffs without getting congressional approval first. Democrats, meantime, are seizing on the issue, saying consumers will suffer and Republicans will be punished.
I think what we're going to see is an enormous correction politically because of the enormous damage economically that Trump is inflicting on America.
Now, many here are calling this Trump's biggest gamble of his presidency, with huge economic and political consequences. But the White House believes these tariffs will eventually bring back manufacturing and jobs to the U.S., and they brush off criticism they might be wrong. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
The federal government is taking steps to ease the pain on Canada's auto sector. As Philip Lee Chinook reports, the impact of tariffs is already being felt.
Outside this General Motors plant just east of Toronto, the reality of U.S. tariffs is sinking in.
I think everybody's afraid. Everybody should be afraid.
This auto worker feels for Stellantis employees down in Windsor. Thousands got news that they would be laid off for 2 weeks for now.
I'm in the same position as everybody else. We're just trying to survive, and we're just trying to make a living.
The auto workers have been through it all. We've been through plant closures. We've been through layoffs.
Workers here who make Chevy Silverados say they will fight to keep doing the work that they're proud of.
Our members are sick of being antagonized and threatened by Donald Trump.
Like Oshawa, Windsor's future is linked to the auto industry. Already on the first day auto tariffs came into effect, Stellantis announced it's idling its Windsor plant for 2 weeks. The union that represents almost 4,000 workers at the plant say auto tariffs could upend a supply chain that will impact tens of thousands more.
You have a whole host of second, third-tier suppliers, both unionized and non-unionized, both in the States, Canada, and Mexico.
Those feeder plants, whether they make seats or other parts, will have to begin laying off workers due to the tightly integrated parts supply chain.
And within 12 hours, we see one of the most important plants in this country that's been around for 99 years go on a 2-week break.
And he says workers here will not be the only ones impacted. About 900 employees in Indiana and Michigan will also face layoffs.
It's going to shut down the suppliers to that plant and the suppliers to the plant in Mexico, many of which are American.
Some say this move by Stellantis is just the beginning as manufacturers like Ford and GM start to crunch the numbers.
So everybody needs to take a pause and understand what exactly is going to happen here. How will this be applied? What are the timelines? And then ultimately, what are the cost implications for the business? Can we continue to profitably produce vehicles in this environment?
Federal and provincial governments have pledged to help workers affected by U.S. tariffs, a shorter wait time to receive employment insurance, and any revenue from counter tariffs imposed on U.S. goods to help soften the blow. Philip Lee Chinook, CBC News, Toronto.
Meanwhile, the head of the European Commission has described U.S. President Donald Trump's new tariffs as a major blow to the world economy. The European Union is planning to impose countermeasures if negotiations fail with the Trump administration. The CBC's Crystal Gamansing reports from London.
La décision qui a été annoncée cette nuit est une décision brutale et infondée.
Brutal and unfounded. Those were the words used by French President Emmanuel Macron to describe tariffs announced by U.S. President Donald Trump Wednesday. In Paris, Macron met with French businesses seriously affected by the sweeping tariffs. He said the custom duties are a shock for international trade, and he's not the only European leader expressing frustration. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said the tariffs were fundamentally wrong. A universal 20% levy on all imports from the EU into the U.S. is expected to take effect April 5th. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, said the bloc of 27 nations will respond strongly together, but that the EU would rather negotiate, not escalate.
The tariffs will also hurt consumers around the world. It will be felt immediately. Millions of citizens will face higher grocery bills. Medication will cost more, as well as transportation. Inflation will go up. And this is hurting in particular the most vulnerable citizens.
A lower tariff has been placed on the UK, just 10%. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that's because the UK trade deficit with the US is, quote, fair and balanced.
It is actually a fair and balanced relationship if you look at the numbers. And of course, we've got decades worth of a special relationship with the United States. And I think it's by focusing on those features that we can take the necessary steps to secure our economy through hopefully a deal with options on the table.
The U.S. is the UK's second largest trading partner behind the EU. That relationship is worth roughly £315 billion. That's about 580 billion Canadian dollars. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
On the campaign trail today, federal party leaders were focused on Donald Trump's trade war. Pierre Poilievre singled out the auto tariffs for a policy announcement. The Conservative leader said he would fight them by eliminating federal tax on Canadian-made vehicles.
By saving cash-strapped Canadians, families, their hard-earned money, we will increase demand for Canadian-made cars and keep more workers on the job.
Poilievre provided a list of vehicles he said met the plan's Canadian-made criteria. In making the announcement, he denounced Donald Trump's trade war, again describing it as tariff madness.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh made a campaign announcement in Ottawa proposing to bring back victory bonds to help the Canadian economy deal with Donald Trump's tariffs.
A victory bond would be a guaranteed investment where you would purchase a bond, a 5-year or 10-year, and if you hold it to maturity, you would get all the revenue tax-free.
Singh says the revenue from these bonds would create work for Canadians, help rebuild public infrastructure. The secure tax-free savings bonds were used during both world wars to raise money for the conflicts. He wraps up for the day in Montreal. Singh and 4 other party leaders appear tonight on Radio Canada's special election program.
The push to get more people into the skilled trades has become an important focus on the campaign trail, with party leaders making pledges to attract more young people to fill the growing demand. But as the CBC's Deanna Sumanaka-Johnson reports, experts worry their proposals don't go far enough.
We'll be putting a switch on the wall here.
Being an electrician has brought Ali Musafai job satisfaction and a lucrative career. Now he's sharing his skills with like-minded teenagers through a special high school program.
The program introduces them to all the basic trade knowledges and materials, so when they do arrive on site, they have that little bit of extra knowledge.
The school gave me a perfect pathway to develop my skills.
We're walking up to the panel here. We're going to wire up this stove receptacle.
Encouraging more people into skilled trades, especially those needed for housing construction, as quickly as possible is becoming an important promise on the campaign trail.
Our goal is to double the pace of housing construction to almost 500,000 new homes every single year.
The plan adds we will expand and accelerate training and apprenticeship programs for skilled trades. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's pitch is even more specific.
Provide the funds for 350,000 young people to go through training to be an apprentice or a tradesman.
Poilievre also promised to reinstate 2 federal apprenticeship grant programs put in place by Prime Minister Stephen Harper, which just ended recently. Experts say these platforms are good news, but more is needed to offset the retirement of 100,000 skilled trade workers projected to happen in the next decade.
You know, the average age of apprentice is like 26, 27 years old. And what that means is they got into the system late, probably having tried a bunch of other things first. So we need to steer people earlier and show them the opportunity at a younger age.
Ontario, along with BC and Northwest Territories, already allows for that. Students in grades 10 and 11 can get on-the-job training while working towards their high school diploma. But there are obstacles.
We need more employers that want to work with students as they're coming out of high school, transitioning from student into apprentice.
Industry professionals say an attitude shift is needed for everyone from parents to guidance counselors to present this career option to young people as a desirable, well-paying calling that can help build Canada's future. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
2 main leaders of the 2022 Convoy protests in Ottawa have been found not guilty of most of their charges. Tamara Leach and Chris Barber learned of the ruling today in an Ontario court. A provincial judge found the pair not guilty of charges related to intimidation and obstructing police. They were each found guilty of counseling others to commit mischief. The judge also found them guilty of committing mischief themselves, but that charge was stayed. The Convoy protest began in response to the Canadian government's COVID-19 health measures and involved the blockade of cars and trucks across the nation's capital. Barber was also found guilty of instructing others to disobey a court appearance. In total, Barber was acquitted on 4 of his 6 charges, with the 7th stayed. Leach was acquitted on 4 of her 5 charges, with the 6th stayed.
Well, there's a new craze in Major League Baseball, a type of bat that's making all the difference on the diamond.
As the CBC's Jamie Strachan explains, the new torpedo bat is a hit with players and fans alike.
Toronto Blue Jay Davis Schneider has a new weapon.
Pitchers are throwing 98, so, I need as much help as I can get.
They call it the torpedo bat.
It looks a little bit weird, just the way that it tapers off at the top, but other than that, it's, I feel like it's just a regular wood bat.
3-run home run for Jazz Chisholm. The bats used by major leaguers haven't changed for years. But on this season's opening weekend, the New York Yankees clubbed a record number of home runs, many in the lineup using the torpedo bat.
I started using it the last week and a half of spring, I think. I just never looked back after that.
Developed by an MIT physicist, the idea of the bat is that it brings more wood or mass to the part of the bat where contact most often happens.
Cruz drills it to center.
Major League Baseball says the bat is legal, and in a sport resistant to change, players are definitely intrigued.
It's just blowing up. There's been nonstop emails, texts from tons of pros.
Ottawa area bat maker Sam Batts has a long list of major league clients and has quickly ramped up production.
Probably hundreds of players across the MLB are now ordering this within the last couple of days. So it's been a crazy day for the bat makers in the world.
Feels pretty good. This is the torpedo bat that everybody's talking about. Davis Schneider is the only Blue Jay that uses it, and he says so far it has made a big difference. At the same time, Schneider jokes, the torpedo doesn't hit the ball for you. It's the carpenter, not the tools.
You still got to square up the ball, you still got to hit it hard, still be on time, so that aspect it doesn't really change.
But when it comes to hitting a baseball, often regarded as the hardest thing to do in sports, every little advantage helps. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
As we told you earlier, stock markets in Canada and the U.S. plunged today as investors reacted to the latest tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump. Here's a look at where things closed as we head to commercial break. Okay, sloppy, damp, but things are going to get better.
Yes, definitely a gray look out the window tonight. Huh?
Yeah, fog patches have arrived here in the metro area. Still snowing Cape Breton, or at least a messy mix at the very least. And that milder air will build in across the east. Temperatures are going to rise. The fog patches will greet the east as well through this evening into the overnight. Let's have a look on a brighter note. The signs of spring. One of the things we look for is the crocuses. The other is, of course, now this looks like a dandelion, but of course we've had this lesson before. This is colt's foot.
Yep.
So usually springs before the dandelions, often does. And thanks to John Earl, who took this walking around Lake Bannock.
We'll take the color
They're
anyway.
bright, yeah. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, definitely. Taking the color anywhere we can get it on a day like this. Lots of color on this map as well, with the snow and the ice pellets changing over to rain. Not a whole lot of moisture once that warm air does arrive. It's more drizzle and fog patches. That's going to be the case into Friday as well, where we'll see a chance for some showers for Cape Breton and eastern areas on Friday. That northwest flow really kind of settling in into the afternoon. So temperatures will drop a couple of degrees for Cape Breton and the North Shore into the afternoon, but we're going to hang on to the double digits for central and western areas. And it looks like a solid mix of sun and cloud. Tri-County area and the west. The clouds likely dominating in the east more than not. And you can see for Friday's temperatures, we'll be looking at 10, 11, 12. So we'll take that. 5 to 9 degrees, depending on where you are across the east and northeast, with that temperature falling. Now for Saturday, temperatures certainly cooler in the east. It's a northeast wind on Saturday, so yeah, those highs are going to struggle for Cape Breton and the North Shore. But work your way inland and down towards the South Shore. We'll look at 4, 5, 6, even 7 degrees. And that area of high pressure will move out, and we are looking at that messy mix then rolling in for Saturday night and into Sunday morning, with snow changing to rain by Sunday afternoon.
Okay, thanks for that, Brian. Donald Trump's latest trade war salvo has caught many countries by surprise, but the long list of the places slapped with export tariffs include places with no humans around. This is Heard Island, a remote territory near Antarctica that belongs to Australia. No one lives there except maybe some penguins.
It faces the 10% U.S. tariff alongside some of the major global economies. The last time it was visited by people was most likely a decade ago.
The puzzling move by the Trump administration had Australia's Prime Minister remark that, quote, nowhere on Earth is safe.
You think the penguins know about the tariffs?
Yeah, I'm not
Hope no
sure.
one told them. That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.